Hello, I'm Deacon Harold Burke Sivers, and this is The Prodigal Life. And I'm joined by Nick and Ellen. And we are here to help bring you into deeper, more intimate relationship with our Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ.
That's right. And we have some special guests with us today that many of you will recognize. Ellen, do you want to introduce our guests and our topic?
I would really love to introduce you to Father Frank Pavone and Janet Morana. They are the priests for life, and they are doing beautiful, beautiful work in the Lord's vineyard in pro-life issues. And we have a lot to celebrate this year, but we have a lot of work to do. And this is the first episode, because they're going to do 2 episodes with us, is going to be a little bit about their testimony, and they're going to share their journeys and how they got to where they are, and we'll ask each other questions and just kind of keep it really, really a comfortable conversation to invite people into your work.
And this is a really exciting opportunity because I recently got to interview Father Frank Pavone at the Catholic Momentum Catholic Marketing Network conference in Chicago in 2021. And when I did that interview with Father Frank, Roe versus Wade was still in effect, still the law of the land. And now we're in a completely different paradigm, which is a big part of why we're here to talk today. So that's exciting.
It's going to be very, very exciting. So if you both want to just introduce yourselves, you know what I mean, and share a little bit about your story. And then if you have any questions for us, you're more than welcome to do that. And we're very grateful for you coming on the podcast today.
Thank you. Janet, why don't you go first?
All right. Well, I'm Janet Morana. I'm the Executive Director of Priests for Life. I also co-founded the Silent No More Awareness Campaign, which is the largest mobilization of women, men, and family members who lost children to abortion, but after going through healing, speak publicly. But many years ago, quite a few years ago, when I was in high school, the church was becoming very boring to me. I didn't have a relationship with Jesus at the time. I would only go to Mass at Christmas and Easter. That was it. So that's the kind of Catholic I drifted into. And I stayed in that world for a very, very long time, over 20 years. And one Saturday night after Mass, as we were leaving church, my young daughter, Torre, was all I used to hear about this new priest, Father Frank Pavone. He had just been ordained in November of '88 by Cardinal O'Connor and sent to my parish. So on this particular Saturday night after the vigil Mass, Tara, we're leaving, and she starts pulling at me. Mom, come here. I want you to meet Father Frank, come here, I want you to meet my mom. And as we got closer, Tara says to me and Father Frank, this is my mom, the one who needs to go to confession. Now I am turning beet red. Yeah, you can see this little pink note? Probably redder than that. And right near me, though, about 20 feet away, was Father Frank's confessional. And he's standing there in his vestments, and I'm there like, and Father goes, "Oh, Terry, that's so nice to meet your mom. And don't worry, she doesn't have to go to confession now. We can wait on that." So what he does is he hands me phone number to the rectory, and he says to me, "You don't have to go to confession now, but why don't you come and talk? We'll just talk about it." I want to talk. He says, yeah, you can call me, make an appointment, come and talk to me at the rectory. From that point forward, I went to Bible class every Friday and had my spiritual direction after Bible class. It took me, though, I wasn't an easy sell, which he could tell you about. It took me quite a few months. It took me all the way from January to June till I finally was ready to go to confession. I was the last person. I went in, I did my confession, and then Father Frank said to me, because I said, tomorrow I get to go to Mass and communion. He says, well, you don't have to wait tomorrow to receive Jesus. We can do that now. He says, go up and kneel by the tabernacle, and I'll meet you up there.
Wow.
So now the church is like kind of lights are low, everyone's gone, and I go kneel up there, and Father Frank comes out and opens the tabernacle and gives me communion, and he kneels next to me, but somehow time stopped. I don't know how long we were kneeling there, but I truly felt like this was my first communion.
Wow.
Because now I fully understood. I fully believed my faith. I went away from the church for over 20 years, but now I've been back over 20 and I'm not going anywhere.
Isn't that a wonderful story?
It is. That's fantastic. Absolutely fantastic.
And I always enjoy hearing it again because, it's a reminder of the call to the priesthood, the call to, as Pope Francis says, accompany the people. through their doubts, through their fears, through their confusion, through their alienation from the church. This was an accompaniment. And it was an accompaniment right through that moment of then saying, the Lord wants to come to you more than you want to come to him. Let's do it now. Give you communion right now. And also accompaniment, but also presence. Janet said, "Oh, it was because I was out there on the plaza, that her daughter was able to bring her up to me." And I always say to my brother priests and deacons, I said, be out there. You're not there simply to do the ritual of the sacraments and the mass. Be out there. One of the things I enjoyed the most was being out there on the plaza. And also, even when we had, and you think about it, and I'll get to my own personal testimony here in a second, when you think about it with these moments of baptisms, funerals, and weddings, what an opportunity for evangelization, because you got people coming into the churches at those times that might not even be Christmas and Easter people. They might be completely disconnected from the sacramental life of the church. And yet here's their one encounter, perhaps in the span of decades. We want it to be a positive experience, that one encounter. And so, what I used to do? I used to stand on the, like for the weddings, when you had the line at the end where people were greeting the bride and the groom and their parents, I'd stand there with them so they could greet the priest too, And because for some of them, it was the first time they ever shook the hand of a priest. First time they ever had a face-to-face conversation with a priest. And this creates a powerful impression and experience of what the church is. And is the church welcoming? Is the church friendly? Or is the church mean and distant, And all of that gets conveyed. And I can't tell you how happy people were just to be able to have that little encounter and go away from the church feeling welcomed. And I would say to the people, on Christmas and Easter, I would say, I would always make a joke in my homily. I'd say, friends, we want to welcome those of you that are not here during the course of the year, but you come on Christmas. Don't let anybody tell you you're a hypocrite. You belong here. You should be here. In fact, we miss you. And, we have a lot of things to tell you about this good news of Jesus. And, we have a lot to say. So we want you to come every Sunday and hear the message. But I'm going to make a deal with you. Either you come every Sunday and hear the good news we have to share with you, or I'll give all the homilies of the coming year right now, one after the other. And they would all laugh. So, but we need to constantly be extending the welcome. And I think that's something that obviously, as Deacon Harold, as we in the clergy, are constantly talking about this. How do we do that better? And so that's why I like hearing Janet's story. It's a reminder to me, and I think to all of us in the clergy, to do that. But my own personal journey, my family was a church-going family, but we weren't really involved in the church beyond that. And we weren't really, although we were practicing Catholics, we didn't have like prayer at home or really any deep involvement in the things of devotional life of the Catholic Church. But in my senior year of high school, I was I went to public school, I should say. It was public schools. And I was very much interested in my studies. I was like in the library all the time. I would go ahead in my classes. They allowed me to attend high school when I was in junior high school for my math classes, because math was my favorite subject. And it was actually mathematics that led me to rediscover more deeply what the faith is. Mathematics, because the deeper you go into it, the more abstract it becomes. You study concepts like infinity. Now, the concept of infinity in mathematics is not that different from the concept of eternity. So thinking mathematically got me thinking philosophically, which in turn got me thinking theologically. You study math and you see that there are laws built in. And there's no exceptions to these laws. There's laws built into the universe. and into the just the mathematical structure of things, and you start wondering, well, who made these laws? And it's got to be a lawmaker. If there's a law, if there's an intelligible law, there's got to be an intelligence. So these basic arguments about the existence of God were coming more and more to the foreground in my mind. Started reading the scriptures, started praying more, started going to church every day before going to school, and rediscovered the Eucharist. And it was just, I was a senior in high school at the time. So this was 1976. I graduated in 1976. At that very same time that this rediscovery of the faith was happening in my life, I got aware of the abortion issue. Now, this was 1976. So Roe v. Wade was 73. So it was very new still in American life. And the March for Life had just started up in 74. So in 76, I heard that there was a bus going from our town to Washington. My mom and my grandmother decided to go, and they asked me if I wanted to come. You want to come to this March for Life in Washington? So I said, yes, I'm interested in that. I'll come to that. I don't know what was going on really with this movement, but I went, and I was very impressed. It was a bitter cold day, but I saw the crowds. I saw the diversity of the crowd. Age, ethnicity, religion, political affiliation. It was a very varied crowd, and they were joyful, even though they were facing up to a very sad and tragic thing. I noticed right away, and I comment on it to this day within the movement, that we have this joyful sorrow. You know, we're lamenting every day over the tragedy of abortion, the killing of these babies, the wounding of the moms, the dads, the families. This is an overwhelming tragedy. And yet when we have a pro-life event, when we have a March for Life, there is palpable joy. What is that? You know, how can we have this joy and sorrow, all combined at the same time? So that impressed me and raised my curiosity. But just the size and the conviction of the crowd got me interested in paying more attention to the abortion issue and the pro-life movement. So my calling to the priesthood, because as I was practicing the faith more deeply, I began to feel that call to spread it to others. And as we know, there's no discipleship without mission. You can't be a follower without also being a proclaimer of the gospel. And I sensed that immediately. I wanted to introduce as many other people as I could to the joy and peace and meaning that I was finding in the deeper practice of the faith. So I began thinking about the priesthood, began thinking about ministry, but at the very same time began thinking more about abortion and the pro-life movement. So those two fundamental aspects of my own vocation were intertwined and very, very up front and center right from the beginning. And I ended up going into seminary right after high school, and I actually started out in the religious life. I was with the Salesians because that was the parish where I grew up. It was a Salesian parish. So I went to their seminary. They had a college seminary just 90 minutes from home, and I went there. Beautiful formation program, really, really great. But when I finished with that, I discerned that what I was really looking for was to be a parish priest. In the Salesians, it was more oriented towards youth work and education, being in schools. So I said, that's great, but I just want to be in a parish. So I ended up, I took a few years off, and then I went into Dunwoody, which is the New York Archdiocesan Seminary in Yonkers, and I got ordained in 1988 by Cardinal O'Connor, and then got sent to Janet's parish. So, but in the meantime, my pro-life involvement was growing stronger and stronger each year with more and more activity. So that's in a nutshell, my story.
Father Frank used to preach a lot on abortion in my parish. Matter of fact, the joke was, how is Father going to get the A word in this Sunday in the homily, meaning abortion? And he would always make a mention. We just knew. But in his homilies, he educated us. And so for me, I became aware of the abortion issue. Up to that point, I didn't even realize there was a Roe v. Wade. It just wasn't on my radar screen, you know?
If I can jump
But
in
boy,
there,
oh boy, when I realized
yeah, Janet, that
it
is
was
such an
eye-opening.
important part of your story, because we do not have enough preachers that are willing to make that a forefront issue, a recurring forefront topic in their preaching. And it would be easy to accuse a priest or a preacher in general that keeps bringing that up week after week. It'd be easy to accuse them of having too much of a laser focus on that one thing when there's so much more to life. But what struck me when you were just sharing that was this idea, like, okay, so let's say you're a priest in Nazi Germany, and like, you have to stand up for truth. You have to help people see what they're not seeing. Like, how do you not, when there's this incredible travesty going on, how do you not try to open the eyes of your community, of the people that are within the bounds of your pastoral work? Like, how do you not, when if you look at the millions, the tens of millions of innocents that have been slaughtered as a result of this evil, how do you not make that a recurring topic and try to, when your parishes, when your communities, when your neighbors may not want to hear about it, like, that is the reason we need to hear about it,
Yeah, and Father Frank can explain it, but the whole homily was not always all on abortion.
Sure.
But he had a knack of just bringing up little messages, little things, so that he was kind of spoon feeding us throughout the year. And then, of course, on Respect My Sunday, Roe v. Wade anniversary, then he would hit the ball out of the park. And you really got a heavy dose.
He was tactful.
But Father, explain, like, you were spoon feeding us throughout the year on the life issue, right?
Yeah, it could be just a mention of the word, and so many times in preaching we'll say, oh, and there are many sins or many evils in the world. There's terrorism, and there's crime, and there's gun violence, and then you just throw in abortion, the killing of babies by abortion, and that, and you can be maybe just a phrase, but people hear it and they begin to connect it with those other forms of violence.
Yeah, I remember the first time after I was ordained, I preached on abortion, and I actually quoted from the Catechism of the Catholic Church, right? And Father said to me, "Well, you got to be careful, Deacon. There might have been someone out there that had an abortion." And I wasn't accusatory. I wasn't pointing fingers. I wasn't blaming. You're going to go to hell. Nothing like that. I was just talking about, the issue, and I thought in a very pastoral way. But he was afraid that someone's going to react, that someone may have had an abortion out there, and now you're bringing it up, and that might stir something in them, and that's one of the reasons maybe people may be afraid clergy afraid to preach on that issue.
Yeah, and isn't that interesting, Deacon Harold, how he would say that, which I'm sure was in all goodwill. But if we're preaching a sermon about stealing, might there not be people in the congregation who have stolen something? I mean, I'm not sure. How does this exactly work? Do we only preach about those evils that our congregation has had nothing to do with? So when you ask that question, obviously the concern was not coming out of some kind of consistent pastoral approach. I think, and I've heard it so many times too, I think that's the fruit of the effort of the other side, which is very aggressive in pushing abortion, the fruit of their efforts to intimidate the clergy.
Yeah.
Now, Janet and I both knew Dr. Bernard Nathanson, who launched the abortion movement in this country. He was one of the architects behind Roe v. Wade. He built the abortion industry, and he later became pro-life and a Catholic. And in fact, Cardinal O'Connor, whom we've been referring to, is the one who baptized him. But Dr. Nathanson, in his strategy of launching the abortion movement, had a definitive plan, a strategic plan of intimidating the clergy and silencing the Catholic Church. And I think that we still see dynamics of that going on the part of the promoters of abortion. They want us to be afraid. Oh, who you going to upset? Who you going to hurt? Who you going to, And it's like, yeah, you know what? We're concerned about those people that have had abortions. That's precisely why we talk about it, because we want them to know that we're aware of their pain and that there's healing for their pain.
Could you talk about how you got involved with Priest for Life? So did you, I think people was what, did you start Priest for Life? Was it already started and you kind of joined it and took it to the next level? How did that involvement happen?
Yeah, that is a very interesting story, because Cardinal O'Connor was one of the he really was the foremost voice among the American hierarchy, and very much in the whole world, together with John Paul II, on abortion. And so it was a great passion for him. He was convinced this was the number one issue of the day. He was for a while the chairman of the Bishop's Pro-Life Committee in those very years after he had ordained me. And so I learned a lot from him about how to handle this issue. And just about 2 years after I was ordained and serving in St. Charles and had just met Janet and her family, Cardinal O'Connor announced that he was starting a religious order dedicated to pro-life, dedicated to serving and saving the unborn, called the Sisters of Life, which are a great flourishing community to this day. And that fascinated me. It made a lot of sense. The church is deeply committed on this issue. And so why shouldn't there be structures in the church, communities that highlight that aspect of the gospel, just like, the Franciscans highlight service to the poor, and Salesians highlight service to the young, and different charisms arise in the church. These are gifts of the Holy Spirit that take shape in religious communities and in other ministries to emphasize one or another aspect of the gospel. So he started the Sisters of Life, and as soon as he did that, now meanwhile, I was doing what Janet had described before. I was preaching a lot on abortion, and I was getting very positive reaction from the people. People were thanking me. They were applauding the homilies, literally. They were getting involved in the pro-life cause. And I started thinking, and Cardinal O'Connor starts the Sisters of Life, and I started thinking, wow, there ought to be something like this for priests. Because if all my brother priests could see the kind of results, because I knew a lot of them were afraid to bring the topic up, but I thought to myself, if they could all be encouraged and they saw the kind of results I'm seeing here in this parish, we could end this problem nationwide. So I began to think of this concept of a priests for life. Well, lo and behold, one of the first women to come to the Sisters of Life was a woman who had lost her husband, and she had a son who was a priest in San Francisco, Father Lee Kaler. And because his widowed mother was joining the Sisters of Life, you know what? He was thinking the same thing I was, that there should be something like this for priests. So he actually got it started with some of his brother priests in California, and I found out about it through the Cardinal, actually. I joined up with them, and hence Priests for Life. Now, they were just doing it part-time, but then as I got involved and as I continued my intense pro-life activity, I came to the point 4 years after ordination that I was convinced, I felt a call within the call, and I felt convinced that I needed to give myself full-time to saving and serving the unborn, and I went to the Cardinal to ask permission to do that. Just before I had the meeting, I had made the appointment, but before the meeting occurred, this same priest from California, Father Lee Kaler, calls me. Now, he was the president, the founding president of Priests for Life. He calls me and he says, I'm going into the military to be a chaplain. We need a new director of the organization. Would you be interested? I said, here's my opening. I go to the Cardinal and I ask him, I tell him I want to do pro-life work full-time of some kind. Maybe it could be as director of Priests for Life. And you know what? That's all exactly what happened. That's what he said okay to. And that's what I've been doing ever since.
It's amazing.
Oh, about that. That's fantastic.
Wow.
So Janet, when did you get involved
Yeah, you said
in
it's
Priests for Life?
Yeah, she said.
Okay, well, okay. And we meet these rescuers at their home on Staten Island, like at 5:30 in the morning. And everything was very cryptic and secret. Like the sun is just coming up and we're getting there. And there's a whole lineup of cars. And another person comes and gives another card. Well, this is the address of the abortion mill where we were going to go that day. So we get there because now we were seeing pregnant girls coming to kill their babies. I had never had that experience before because we were lucky on Staten Island. We didn't have any freestanding abortion mills. So this was my first time standing in front of an abortion mill. And from that point forward, I made a promise to God that I'm going to do, this will be my part-time activity. And I then devoted all my time, besides raising my daughters, obviously, and teaching full-time, to helping Father. And I did that for several years until in June of 2000, I got at a crossroads where I can't keep teaching and help Father. The ministry's growing. What am I going to do? And Father said, come work for Priest for Life now. He goes, we've raised enough money. I'm hiring more staff. We'll hire you, Janet. So in June 28th of 2000, I walked away from a really great public school teaching career. I was winning grants for my district and, just really doing all kinds of stuff. And I walked away from public school teaching, and people thought I was nuts, giving up the pension and everything, and became executive director of Priest for Life. And at the final luncheon that my colleagues gave me in public school to say goodbye to me, they were still saying, oh, Janet, we can't believe we're doing this. And I said, well, ladies and gentlemen, the reason I'm doing it is so that you will have job security.
Yeah.
Because if they keep killing babies through abortion, your class size will diminish and some of you will lose your job. So I'm actually going to be helping you. So now Father can give his reflection.
What we're going to do is we're going to start the second episode with Father Frank's reflection on what really pushed the envelope to get him really fired up, you know what I mean? And we'll talk about where we go from here, like kind of the progression. Wow, that was quite the conversation. And we would really love for you to follow us at the awakenapp.io. You can get it on your Google Play Store or your Apple iStore or Apple Tunes or whatever it's called, that Apple Store. I don't have an Apple, so we don't have an Apple Store. Anyway, but you can go there and there's wonderful content. And if you really enjoy the content you just saw, you can get that plus much more. There's music and prayer, a prayer library, and a messaging app that's very safe. And we would love for you to do that. And then Deacon Harold's going to tell us a little bit more about how you can support us so that we can continue to bring you quality guests and quality content.
Just go to theprodigalife.com, and there you will see different levels of which you can support us financially. And we've tied those giving levels to the hierarchy of angels, so you can become an angel investor in the Prodigal Life.
And please come back next week, and so you can view episode 2 of our beautiful interview with the Priest for Life with Father Frank Pavone and Janet Morana, because it was just an amazing part 1, and I know you want to see part 2. Thank you. God bless you all.